talk about student loans, and some pretty big things are happening. You might have seen in the news that just recently they extended the COVID relief for student loans. So that COVID relief,
Good idea.
exactly. Technically, they call it the National COVID Emergency Forbearance. How's that for a mouthful?
It is a mouthful.
It started back in March of 2020, right, when pandemic was raging, and it was just going to last for, till September of 2020. And then it was extended again through through December, and then now again through January 31st of this coming year. So you were saying, Dr. Randy, it's a good idea, and I agree. Let's just talk for a minute about, why do you think it's oh, we've got a friend in the back. Hello, friend.
Yeah. Welcome to my home.
What's happening with our healthcare providers during the pandemic, and why do you think it's a great idea to have a pause on student loan payments? What does the doctor's lounge think?
Well, my experience, particularly with younger physicians that I've had on my podcast, for example, is it's hard to find a physician, particularly a young physician in practice today, that's not still in the process of trying to pay off these loans.
Yeah.
Add that to all the other pressures that physicians deal with, and throw a pandemic on top of it. It's just one more weight. We talk about the straw that broke the camel's back, but this is no straw. This is like a boulder. So the student loans are something that potentially these young physicians can have some control over, and you've got the information on how we do that. So that's why I think it's a good idea.
Yeah, and Joy, we've done things on young physician burnout and stuff, and that's part of why this company exists.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is, opposed to our generation, which is older, where you start to see this in their 50s, these kids are starting to feel this in their 30s. And so their debt service is probably one of their biggest concerns.
Yeah. I've actually talked to some people that talked about getting burned out during their training years.
Yeah.
Very sad.
Yeah, it's heavy. And I think related to student loans and burnout, there's some things that are really impactful, and it is what it is, right? There's nothing a physician can do about it. And so we're seeing some sense of, okay, it's my problem. I took on these loans. I got to take care of it myself. And sometimes physicians forget they're part of a system, right? And there is a lot of support there from organizations like yours, from their institutions, providing some education. But technically what happens if you owe $300,000 in medical education debt, which is not unusual, that's not an outlier number, that's just a common number. 250 to 450 is what we see every day when we open up our email to look at the case that's in front of us. And if you have $300,000 of student debt and you want to pay it off in 10 years, which most physicians do, they don't want to be carrying that debt while their kids are going to school, for example, it's going to cost you $3,500 a month to pay that student loan note.
That's such a large number. That's such a large number.
Joy, are the majority of their loans, and I think I brought this up in April with my own daughter, but they're a hodgepodge of all these different interest rates and loans, and the worry was that if you consolidate your government loans to a private supplier, then you don't have any comeback with the government if they do this, for example.
Totally. I'm so glad you asked that question. That is a huge question, especially now because there's all kinds of public policy buzz, and I hope we'll talk about this later too. But President Biden campaigned on the issue of, forgiving loans. He didn't say how much, I think, 10 to 50,000, but some of his opponents were saying, oh, forgive all loans. There's all this pressure because of how bad the student loan servicing companies have been and all their dirty tricks. It's awful. But there are people like your daughter's situation. I don't remember exactly, but there's people that are having the question of, well, should I refinance my student loans or should I keep them with the federal government? And there's this fear in the back of their head that, uh-oh, if I refinance, it's good because I'll lower my interest rate and save a boatload of money. But if I refinance with a private bank, then if there's some forgiveness that happens with the federal government, I'll be out of luck.
Yeah.
And so it's really causing people to feel stuck, right? And so
so then they
that's
don't make
issue.
any action.
Right, right. And sometimes waiting is a good idea.
Yeah.
We are coaching a lot of our folks right now to wait because we do believe there is some momentum building for some kind of forgiveness. Do you have your crystal ball today, Dr. Rick?
Yeah.
What's the president going to do? What's Congress going to do about student loans?
Yeah, my gut feeling is that it'll be more than 10. I just have a feeling the way they're going, there's been enough. It's kind of like the legalization of marijuana. I just kind of feel like there's a tsunami of change coming for it. Yeah. So I suspect it'll be more. Now, I don't know when somebody it might be as high as 50 in my mind. But what did you hear when you went and testified? What was it?
Oh, you guys, talk about it's very exciting to testify for the U.S. Department of Education. Lots of really smart people like in the queue to be testifying too. But it's sort of interesting. So one of my big deals for a long time, at least 4 years, has been that there's been no accountability. So the loan servicing companies, the ones that have these contracts with the federal government, like Fed Loans, Mohila, Navient, there's about a dozen or so, and they have contracts with the federal government to service all the physicians and everybody's student loans. And they're making mistakes. They're doing things that are illegal, actually. There's these reports out that have been showing recently from the Student Borrower Protection Center. That's a mouthful, too. Student Borrower Protection Center. Over 5 million documented errors on the parts of only one loan servicing company, right? And there's other things they've done illegal. It's a mess. And physicians are in the middle of trying to figure this out. So I'm saying, well, hey, I know from business, you have a contract, you're held accountable to the contract, right? That's just basic business law.
Yeah.
Well, no one has been holding these loan servicing companies accountable. So I spent a lot of my time talking about that and how, as public citizens, all of our borrowers are, participants in our democracy. They trust our government to hold their contract holders accountable. And so that was a big piece of what I spoke about. And then it's not just me, a lot of people are calling for this accountability. And then what happened a couple months later, I'm not going to take credit for this, haha, Rick, but one of the biggest loan servicing companies decided to exit their contract. So as of December, Fed Loan Servicing, who many of our physician borrowers are using because they're pursuing public service loan forgiveness, they will no longer hold a contract with the U.S. Department of Education to service loans.
Wow.
So some of us are thinking, okay, the push for accountability put so much pressure on them that they, it's no longer maybe a profitable marketplace for them, or for who knows what reasons they decided to exit the contract.
Well,
so that's going to cause problems for the borrowers.
I was just going to say, what kind of position does that put the borrower in, and then what are their options?
Right. Yeah, totally. And Rick, you had a question too.
Well, no, I was going to say it sounds similar to the real estate market and coming down on the banks. I mean, for illegal, over the top bank loans, or what do you call them, underwater loans, or however they did that. The students were easy prey.
Yeah.